The air in the terminal felt stale and recycled, like my life for the past 3 years. I clutched my hastily packed carry-on, knuckles white against the worn fabric handle. My other hand absently traced the fading bruise on my wrist, a parting gift from Eric. The overhead announcements blended with the din of travelers, creating a comforting anonymity I desperately needed. Final boarding call for Flight 1867 to Naples, Italy. My ticket to freedom. My escape route. My desperate last-minute decision that had cost nearly everything I had left. I shuffled forward in the boarding line, keeping my head down. Old habits. Even in an airport thousands of miles from Boston, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, hunted. My phone had buzzed 14 times in the past hour. I'd turned it off after the third call. Eric always had a way of making threats sound like love. If you leave me, I'll die without you. Quickly became, if you leave me, you'll die without me. The gate agent scanned my boarding pass with a practiced smile. Enjoy your flight, Ms. Riley. Riley wasn't my real last name. But Sophia Riley would do for now. The jetway stretched before me like a tunnel to another life. I'd made no plans beyond this flight. No hotel reservations, no return ticket. Just a desperate need to disappear. 3 months of secretly saved tips from the diner, a maxed-out credit card, and a passport I'd hidden in the bottom of my grandmother's old jewelry box had brought me here. My seat was near the back, 25A, window. I preferred the wall to lean against, one less stranger to smile politely at. The plane was already crowded, the overhead bins stuffed with designer luggage that made my secondhand bag look even shabbier. I squeezed past knees and muttered apologies until I reached my row. Empty. Thank God. I collapsed into the seat, allowing myself the first real breath I'd taken since leaving the apartment at 4 a.m., while Eric slept off another rage-fueled night. My fingers trembled as I buckled the seatbelt, the simple action requiring more coordination than it should have. Water? Before takeoff? I looked up to find a flight attendant offering a plastic cup. Her eyes flickered briefly to the fading yellowish marks on my wrist, then back to my face with practiced neutrality. Thank you, I whispered, taking the cup with both hands to keep from spilling. The plane continued to fill. A large family with small children settled across the aisle. A young couple took seats in front of me, already leaning into each other with the easy intimacy of people who had never used love as a weapon. I turned toward the window, watching ground crew scurry around with luggage carts. I was really doing this, leaving everything. What little I had left, anyway. No job, no friends Eric hadn't isolated me from, no family since Gran died last year. Just a desperate woman running from the monster who'd promised to love her. The sudden shift of weight beside me pulled me from my thoughts. Someone was taking the seat next to mine. I kept my gaze fixed firmly on the tarmac outside, shoulders tensing instinctively. 3 years of living with Eric had taught me to make myself smaller, to avoid drawing attention. A scent cut through the recycled airplane air, expensive cologne with notes of cedar and something darker, more primal. Not overpowering, but undeniably present, like its wearer was used to making an impression without trying. From my peripheral vision, I saw hands. Strong hands with neat manicured nails, and a heavy watch that probably cost more than everything I owned. One hand bore a signet ring on the pinky finger, old-world style, gold with some kind of emblem I couldn't make out. "Pardon," a deep voice said, the word wrapped in an Italian accent that turned the simple apology into something rich and textured. I shifted slightly to give him more room, still not looking up. The armrest between us disappeared beneath his forearm. Clearly, he was a man used to taking up space, claiming territory. "First time to Italy?" he asked. I hesitated before answering. Eric had always told me I was too trusting, too willing to talk to strangers. Before he decided I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone at all. But Eric wasn't here. Eric would never find me again. "Yes," I answered, finally turning slightly. The word died in my throat as I took in the man beside me. Dark hair, styled perfectly, with just a touch of silver at the temples. A face that belonged on ancient Roman coins. Strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes so dark they were nearly black. His skin was olive-toned, smooth except for the faint lines that appeared at the corners of his eyes when he offered a slight smile. He wore a suit that didn't have a designer label visible, but screamed custom-made from every perfect seam. "You will love Naples," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, though it can be unpredictable for those who don't know how to navigate it. Something in his tone made me wonder if he was talking about more than just tourism tips. I nodded, hoping he'd leave it at that. I wasn't in the mood for conversation, especially with a man who radiated the kind of confidence that came with power. I'd had enough of powerful men. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, and I gratefully turned my attention to them. But I remained acutely aware of him beside me, the subtle shift as he crossed his legs, the way he checked a message on his phone before airplane mode was enforced, the almost imperceptible nod he gave to someone several rows ahead of us. As the plane began taxiing, I gripped the armrests. Flying had always made me nervous, but today it represented salvation. The faster we were in the air, the farther I'd be from Boston, from Eric, from the life that had become a prison. "Not a good flyer?" the man beside me asked, noticing my white-knuckle grip. "I'm fine," I replied, more curtly than I intended. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small silver flask. With practiced discretion, he poured a splash of amber liquid into his plastic cup of ice. "For the nerves," he offered, extending the cup to me. "Much better than whatever they serve on board." I should have declined. I didn't know this man. But something about his casual confidence made the offer seem like the most natural thing in the world. I accepted the cup, our fingers brushing momentarily. His were warm against my perpetually cold ones. The whiskey burned pleasantly down my throat, warming me from the inside. It was undoubtedly the finest liquor I'd ever tasted. "Thank you," I said, returning the cup. He took it back, his eyes never leaving mine as he drank from the same spot my lips had touched. It was such a deliberately intimate gesture that I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "My pleasure," he replied, the words carrying a weight beyond simple courtesy. The plane accelerated down the runway, and I closed my eyes as we lifted into the air. With each passing second, Boston grew smaller beneath us. Eric grew smaller. My fear should have been shrinking too. But somehow, sitting next to this stranger, I felt a new kind of unease taking root. When I opened my eyes again, he was watching me. Not obviously. He appeared to be reading something on his tablet, but I could feel his attention like a physical touch. "I'm Alessio," he said, not looking up from his screen. I hesitated. Sophia Riley was my new name, my hiding name, but the way he said his own name, offering it like both a gift and a challenge, made me reckless. "Sophia," I replied, giving only half my lie. "Sophia," he repeated, testing it on his tongue. He looked up then, fixing me with those dark eyes. "It doesn't suit you." My blood ran cold. How could he possibly know? "Excuse me?" His lips curved slightly. "You look more like a Lucia, perhaps, or Valentina." He shrugged. "Something Italian." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by wariness. There was something disconcerting about this man, something that told me he saw too much. "My mother wasn't very creative," I lied. "Mothers rarely are what we need them to be," he replied, a shadow crossing his features. The conversation lulled as the flight attendants began the beverage service. Alessio ordered sparkling water in fluid Italian, then turned to me. "And for the lady?" "Just water, please," I said to the attendant, uncomfortable with him ordering for me. "And perhaps a sandwich," he added, gesturing to the menu. "The international flights have better food options." I stiffened. "I'm not hungry." "You haven't eaten today," he stated. Not a question. "Your hands shook when you took the water earlier. Not just nerves." I stared at him, caught between indignation and shock at his observation. "I'm quite capable of ordering for myself if I want something," I said quietly, but firmly. A flash of something, respect perhaps, crossed his face. "Of course, my apologies." The flight attendant moved on, and I turned back to the window, unsettled. Outside, there was nothing but clouds and blue sky, no sign of the ground I was running from or the destination I was running toward. "You're traveling with very little luggage for an international trip," Alessio commented after a few minutes of silence. I didn't respond. Last-minute decision? He pressed. Something like that, I murmured. Running to something, or from something. I turned to face him fully now, anger temporarily overriding caution. Is there a reason you're so interested in my travel arrangements? His expression remained impassive, but something darkened in his eyes. Not anger, but something more dangerous. Interest. Professional habit, he replied smoothly. I noticed details. And what profession would that be? Import-export primarily, though my family has diverse interests. The way he said family carried a weight I couldn't quite decipher. And you, Sophia, what brings you to Italy besides your apparent desire to escape? I swallowed hard. This man saw too much, asked too many questions. Eric had been charming too, in the beginning. Before the control, before the isolation, before the first time he decided I needed to be taught a lesson. Tourism, I said flatly. I've always wanted to see Pompeii. Ah, the famous ruins. He nodded. A city frozen in time at its moment of destruction. There's something poetic about that, isn't there? Life, interrupted. The way he spoke made the hairs on my arms stand up. It wasn't what he said, but how he said it. Like he was speaking about something else entirely. I suppose, I replied noncommittally. The beverage cart reached us. The flight attendant served our drinks with a smile that faltered slightly when she looked at Alessio. Not fear exactly, but something adjacent to it. Recognition, perhaps? Anything else, sir? She asked, her professional demeanor suddenly more pronounced. We're fine for now, grazie, he replied with a dismissive nod. She moved on quickly. Too quickly. I took a sip of my water, mind racing. Who was this man? Something about him screamed danger. Yet I couldn't put my finger on why. He was polite, well-dressed, articulate, but beneath the veneer of civility lurked something predatory, just like Eric. Just like the man I was running from. I excused myself to use the bathroom, needing a moment away from his overwhelming presence. In the tiny lavatory, I splashed water on my face and stared at my reflection. Dark circles beneath hazel eyes, hair hastily pulled into a ponytail, the fading bruise on my cheekbone mostly covered by concealer. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman on the run. When I returned to my seat, Alessio was speaking in rapid Italian on his phone, despite the in-flight rules. No flight attendant came to reprimand him. He ended the call as I approached, standing slightly to let me pass to the window seat. Everything okay? I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. He smiled, a gesture that didn't quite reach his eyes. Just business that couldn't wait. Nothing for you to worry about. The phrase, you to worry about, struck me as odd. As if my worrying was somehow his concern. The meal service began, and despite my earlier refusal, the flight attendant placed a tray in front of me. Compliments of the gentleman, she said quietly, avoiding eye contact. I looked at Alessio, who was focused on his own meal. I told you I wasn't hungry, and I decided not to listen, he replied, cutting into his chicken with precise movements. You'll need your strength for Naples. The statement held an undercurrent I couldn't quite grasp. I can take care of myself, I insisted. He looked up then, his dark eyes assessing. Can you, Sophia? Is that why you're running? My breath caught. I'm not running. The hasty packing, the way you flinch at sudden movements, the bruises you've tried to hide. He took a sip of his drink, casual as if discussing the weather. The fact that you've checked your phone, which is turned off, 6 times since boarding, as if expecting someone to somehow track you. Panic rose in my chest, constricting my breathing. Who are you? I told you. Alessio Ricci. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it suggested it should. And what do you want from me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He considered me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Right now? I want you to eat. Later. His lips curved slightly. We'll see. I picked at the airline food, my appetite non-existent despite having skipped breakfast in my rush to escape. Alessio ate methodically beside me, cutting his chicken into perfect squares, each movement precise and controlled. The silence between us hummed with unasked questions. Whoever he is, Alessio said suddenly, his voice low enough that only I could hear. He won't find you. My fork clattered against the plastic tray. I don't know what you're talking about. His dark eyes held mine, unflinching. The man who put those bruises on you. The man you're running from. Heat rushed to my face. Shame, fear, and anger tangling together. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, he replied, dabbing the corner of his mouth with a napkin. I know the look of a hunted woman. I've seen it before. Something in his tone made me wonder if he was usually the hunter rather than the protector. It's not your concern, I said, turning back to the window, though there was nothing but darkness outside now. The sun had set somewhere over the Atlantic, while I sat trapped in this metal tube with a stranger who saw too much. Perhaps not, he conceded. But I've never been good at minding my own business. Ask my brothers. The casual reference to family caught me off guard. I tried to imagine this imposing man in a normal family setting, surrounded by siblings, maybe nieces and nephews. The image wouldn't form. The flight attendant collected our trays. Her movements rushed as she approached Alessio. I noticed other passengers stealing glances in our direction, quickly looking away when they met his gaze. Did they recognize him? Or was it just his commanding presence that drew attention? You should try to sleep, Alessio suggested as the cabin lights dimmed for the overnight flight. The time difference will be difficult otherwise. Sleep beside this man? I couldn't imagine being more vulnerable. I'm not tired, I lied. He chuckled, a surprisingly warm sound from such a cold man. Stubborn. That's good. You'll need that quality in Naples. Why do you keep saying things like that? About Naples? He regarded me thoughtfully. Naples is my city. Beautiful, dangerous, full of secrets. Not a place for the unprepared. I've done my research, I said defensively. Though I'd done nothing of the sort. Naples had been the destination with the soonest available flight when I was booking my escape in the middle of the night. Of course, he replied, clearly not believing me. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, offering it to me between two fingers. Nevertheless, should you find yourself overwhelmed? I hesitated before taking it. The card was heavy, expensive stock with embossed lettering, just a name, Alessio Ricci, and a phone number. No company, no title. What exactly is your business, Mr. Ricci? Alessio, please. He adjusted his cuffs, revealing gold cufflinks that caught the dim cabin light. And as I said, import-export primarily. Family business. There it was again. Family. The way he said it carried weight. And this family business requires you to fly commercial? I'd have expected a private jet. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Instead of taking offense, he seemed amused. Sometimes it's useful to travel inconspicuously. Nothing about this man was inconspicuous. And sometimes, he continued, lowering his voice, unexpected meetings prove fortuitous. The intensity of his gaze made me look away. I slipped his card into my pocket, unsure why I was keeping it. I think I'll try to sleep after all, I murmured, reclining my seat slightly and turning toward the window. Sweet dreams, Sophia, he replied, the name still sounding wrong on his lips, as if he knew it wasn't really mine. I closed my eyes but remained acutely aware of him beside me. The subtle scent of his cologne, the rustle as he opened a book, the controlled rhythm of his breathing. Despite my exhaustion, sleep felt dangerous, yet eventually, the hum of the engines and the emotional toll of the day pulled me under. I dreamed of running through Boston streets, Eric always one step behind me. But in the dream, someone else was ahead of me, a dark figure standing in the shadows, waiting. When I reached him, he turned, and Alessio's face emerged from the darkness, hand extended toward me. Behind me, Eric's footsteps grew louder. Choose, Dream Alessio commanded. I woke with a start, disoriented. The cabin was dark, most passengers sleeping. A blanket had been placed over me, one I didn't remember requesting. I turned to find Alessio still awake, reading from a tablet, the screen's glow illuminating his sharp features. Bad dream? He asked without looking up. I straightened, embarrassed to realize I'd been leaning slightly toward him in my sleep. I don't remember. His lips curved slightly, knowing. We're about 3 hours from landing. I checked my watch, 2:13 a.m. Boston time, which meant it was morning in Italy. Soon I'd be in a new country, with no plan, no contacts, and dwindling funds. The reality of my situation crashed over me, and my hands began to tremble again. "Second thoughts?" Alessio asked, observing my distress. "No," I said firmly. Going back wasn't an option. Eric had made that clear the last time I tried to leave. Good. He set his tablet down and turned to face me fully. "Tell me, what will you do in Naples? Where will you stay?" I bristled at the interrogation. "I'll figure it out." With no reservations, limited funds, and no knowledge of the city or language, his tone wasn't mocking, merely factual, which somehow made it worse. "How do you know I don't speak Italian?" I challenged. "Do you?" "No," I admitted, hating how easily he read me. He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. Naples can be challenging for unprepared tourists, especially women traveling alone. A chill ran down my spine. Was that a threat? "I've managed worse situations," I said, thinking of the hell I'd endured with Eric. "I'm sure you have." His dark eyes studied me with uncomfortable intensity, which is why I'm offering assistance. I stiffened. "I don't need help from strangers. We're hardly strangers now, Sophia. We've shared a meal, a conversation. You even slept on my shoulder for a time." Heat rushed to my face. "I didn't." "You did." He seemed amused rather than bothered. "You looked peaceful. I didn't have the heart to wake you." The thought of being so vulnerable around him unsettled me. "What kind of assistance are you offering exactly?" "Practical matters. A driver to take you to a suitable hotel. Perhaps recommendations for areas to avoid." He paused, watching my reaction. No strings attached. I'd heard that before. There were always strings. "Why would you help me? What do you get out of it?" His expression turned serious. "Let's just say I have a particular distaste for men who harm women." Something in his tone made me believe him, though the intensity behind the words suggested personal experience rather than mere chivalry. "Thank you, but I'll be fine on my own." Independence was something I'd fought hard to reclaim, and I wasn't about to surrender it to another controlling man, no matter how well-dressed or seemingly concerned. He inclined his head, accepting my refusal with surprising grace. "As you wish, but keep my card. Naples can be unpredictable." The rest of the flight passed in relative silence. Alessio took a business call in hushed Italian, while I pretended to read the in-flight magazine. As we began our descent, the reality of my situation loomed larger. I had a small amount of cash, one change of clothes, and no concrete plan beyond not Boston. The plane touched down with a jolt, and passengers around us immediately reached for their phones. Eager to reconnect with the world, I left mine off. Eric would have noticed my absence by now, would have called dozens of times, left threatening messages, might have even reported me missing. The thought made my stomach clench. "Welcome to Naples," Alessio said as the plane taxied to the gate. He stood, buttoning his jacket with a fluid motion, and reached into the overhead bin to retrieve a sleek leather briefcase. No other luggage. "Just a day trip?" I asked, gesturing to his minimal belongings. "I keep necessities at my home here." He stepped into the aisle, then paused, looking back at me. "Last chance, Sophia. My driver is waiting." For a brief, mad moment, I considered accepting. There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled at me despite every instinct screaming caution. "No, thank you," I said firmly. "I appreciate the offer." He studied me a moment longer, then nodded once. "Arrivederci, then." As he moved toward the front of the plane, other passengers seemed to shrink back slightly, creating space for him to pass. Near the exit, he paused to speak to a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit who'd been sitting several rows ahead of us. The man glanced back in my direction, then nodded at whatever instruction Alessio was giving. I gathered my small bag, suddenly unsure. Had I made a mistake refusing his help? Or would accepting have been the bigger error? As I made my way through Naples International Airport, the foreign language signs and bustling crowds overwhelmed my senses. I followed the flow of travelers toward customs, clutching my passport with its fresh stamp. My first time in Europe, and I was alone, adrift. I half expected to see Alessio waiting beyond customs, perhaps with that knowing smile, ready to renew his offer. but he was nowhere in sight. I told myself the twinge I felt was relief, not disappointment. Outside the terminal, the Mediterranean sun hit me like a physical force after the recycled air of the plane. Taxi drivers called out in Italian. Tourists clutched guidebooks. Families reunited with cries and embraces. I stood frozen, paralyzed by freedom and fear in equal measure. My new life started now, if only I knew what that meant. The taxi driver spoke broken English, gesturing animatedly as he navigated Naples's chaotic streets. I'd shown him the name of a budget hotel I'd frantically Googled at the airport information desk. My phone briefly powered on in airplane mode to avoid any incoming calls or texts. "First time Napoli?" he asked, swerving around a scooter. "Yes," I replied, white-knuckling the door handle as we took a corner too fast. "Beautiful city, beautiful, but careful, signorina. Some areas—" He made a slicing motion across his throat. "Not good for American ladies alone." A chill ran down my spine. Was nowhere safe? The hotel, when we arrived, looked nothing like its optimistic online photos. Paint peeled from the facade, and the narrow entrance was wedged between a kebab shop and a store selling knockoff designer bags. I paid the driver with some of my precious euros and wheeled my small carry-on inside. The lobby, if it could be called that, consisted of a desk behind bulletproof glass and 2 plastic chairs with cigarette burns. The clerk barely looked up as I requested a room, sliding a key through the slot after I paid for 3 nights in advance. No credit card required. A small mercy, as I was trying to avoid digital footprints Eric might trace. My room was on the 3rd floor, accessed by a narrow staircase that smelled of disinfectant and something less pleasant. The door stuck when I tried the key, requiring a hard shove with my shoulder. Inside, a sagging double bed took up most of the space. The bathroom was barely large enough to turn around in, with a shower that dripped continuously. But it was mine. No Eric. No fear of a bedroom door being flung open in the middle of the night because I'd disrespected him by speaking to a male customer at the diner. No walking on eggshells, measuring every word, every expression. I sank onto the bed, the springs protesting beneath me, and finally allowed myself to cry. Great, heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep inside, years of fear and pain flooding out now that I was truly alone. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen, until there was nothing left but emptiness and exhaustion. When I woke, disoriented in the unfamiliar room, the sliver of sky visible through the narrow window had darkened to twilight. I'd slept the day away. My stomach growled painfully, reminding me that the airline meal had been my last food. I splashed water on my face in the tiny sink, trying not to look too closely at the brownish stains around the drain. My reflection in the cracked mirror showed puffy eyes and hollow cheeks. I looked haunted. I supposed I was. Gathering my courage, I tucked my room key and most of my remaining cash into my pocket, keeping just enough euros for dinner in my hand. The street outside had transformed with nightfall. Neon signs flickered, music poured from open doorways, and groups of locals gathered at sidewalk tables, smoking and laughing over wine. I found a small pizzeria a few blocks from the hotel, settling at a corner table where I could watch the door, another habit formed during my time with Eric. The waiter approached with a rapid stream of Italian. "I'm sorry, English?" I asked. His friendly expression dimmed slightly, but he switched languages. "What you like, miss?" I ordered the cheapest pizza on the menu and a glass of house red wine. When the food arrived, the rich scent of tomatoes and basil made my stomach clench with hunger. I devoured half the pizza before coming up for air, the simple meal tasting like freedom. As I sipped my wine, trying to make it last, I became aware of a presence across the restaurant. A broad-shouldered man in a dark suit sat alone, seemingly focused on his phone. Something about his posture seemed familiar. With a jolt, I recognized him as the man Alessio had spoken to on the plane. Coincidence? Naples was a big city, but when I paid my bill and left, I noticed him doing the same, maintaining a careful distance behind me. My heart rate accelerated. I took a random turn down a narrow side street, then another. He followed, unhurried but deliberate. Panic rising, I quickened my pace, taking more turns, trying to lose him in the maze of streets. Instead, I found myself in a dimly lit alley, the sounds of the main thoroughfare fading behind me. Ahead, 2 men leaned against a wall, passing a bottle between them, They straightened as they spotted me, a woman alone, clearly foreign, clearly lost. I stopped, caught between the men ahead and my pursuer behind. The proverbial rock and hard place. One of the men called out something in Italian, his tone making the meaning clear despite the language barrier. They started toward me, movements predatory. I backed up, preparing to run, when a hand closed around my upper arm. I whirled, coming face to face with my follower from the restaurant. "Ms. Riley," he said in accented English, "this is not a safe area." The two men ahead hesitated, eyeing my companion. He said something in rapid Italian, his tone leaving no room for argument. They muttered between themselves, then slunk away down the alley. "How do you know my name?" I demanded, twisting to free my arm from his grip. He released me immediately but remained close. "Mr. Ricci thought you might need assistance," he replied, expression impassive. "I am Franco. I work for him." "He sent you to follow me?" Indignation flared, drowning out the relief I should have felt at the timely intervention. Franco's face remained stoic. "To ensure your safety. Naples can be dangerous for those who don't know it." "I don't need a babysitter," I snapped, though even I could hear the false bravado in my voice. "Of course not," he agreed smoothly. "But perhaps you need a guide to return you to your hotel. This is not a district for tourists after dark." I hesitated, weighing my options. The alley suddenly seemed more threatening without the buffer of Franco's presence. Pride warred with practicality. "Fine," I conceded. "But just back to the hotel." He nodded once and gestured for me to precede him, maintaining a respectful distance as we navigated the winding streets back to the main road. He flagged down a taxi with startling ease, the driver pulling over immediately when he raised his hand. "Hotel Veneto," Franco instructed, opening the door for me. "How did you know where I'm staying?" I asked, suspicion returning. "It is my job to know," he replied simply. Before I could decide whether to be frightened or impressed, he closed the door and stepped back, watching as the taxi pulled away. The last glimpse I had of him was through the rear window, standing perfectly still amid the flow of pedestrians, phone already to his ear, reporting to Alessio, no doubt. The next morning, I awoke to a sharp knock on my door. Hand shaking, I approached cautiously. Had Eric somehow found me? Had hotel management come to complain about something? "Who is it?" I called, voice steadier than I felt. "Delivery for Sophia Riley." I opened the door a crack, chain still in place. A young man in uniform held a large white box tied with a burgundy ribbon. "I didn't order anything," I said. He consulted a slip of paper. "Room 307? Sophia Riley?" I nodded reluctantly. "Then this is for you, signora." He thrust the box through the narrow opening and departed with a cheerful, "Buongiorno." I stared at the package on my bed with trepidation. No return address, no card. With cautious fingers, I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a sundress in deep blue cotton, elegant in its simplicity. Beneath it, a matching cardigan, comfortable walking sandals in what appeared to be my size, and a small leather crossbody bag. At the bottom of the box, a sealed envelope. The paper inside was thick, cream-colored stationery embossed with an ornate R at the top. "Sophia, Naples deserves to be experienced properly. Allow me to make amends for my forwardness yesterday with these small necessities. Franco will collect you at 10 a.m. if you wish to see the city as it should be seen. No obligations beyond tourism. Alessio Ricci." A postscript followed in elegant handwriting. "The dress is the color of the Mediterranean at dusk. I thought it would suit your eyes." I dropped the note as if it had burned me. How had he found me? How did he know my room number, my shoe size? The intrusion should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a disturbing flutter of... not quite fear. Not quite excitement. Something dangerous in between. Eric had begun with gifts, too. Small, thoughtful presents that later became leverage. "After everything I've given you, this is how you repay me?" The memory doused any warmth I might have felt at Alessio's gesture. I checked the time. 9:30 a.m. I had 30 minutes to decide whether to meet Franco or barricade myself in this depressing room. 30 minutes to choose between isolation and the company of a stranger who seemed to know too much about me. The dress called to me from the box. My own clothes were wrinkled from travel, and I had only one change of underwear and a t-shirt in my hastily packed bag. The practical side of me argued that accepting clothes didn't mean accepting whatever game Alessio was playing. At 10 a.m. precisely, another knock came at my door. I opened it wearing the blue dress, which fit as if it had been made for me. Franco stood in the hallway, as expressionless as the night before. If he noticed the outfit, he gave no indication. Mr. Ricci has arranged a tour of the city's highlights, he said. The car is waiting. Just a tour? I asked skeptically. Just a tour, he confirmed. You will be returned here afterward unless you request otherwise. Curiosity and cabin fever won out over caution. Let me get my bag. The car turned out to be a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows. Franco held the back door open for me, then took his place behind the wheel. The vehicle glided through Naples' morning traffic as if by magic, never caught in the congestion that snarled other cars. Where are we going first? I asked, watching the city unfold beyond the window. Castel dell'Ovo, Franco replied. The oldest castle in Naples, then perhaps the archaeological museum, if it interests you. And Alessio? Will he be joining us? I tried to sound casual, but Franco's sharp glance in the rearview mirror told me I'd failed. Mr. Ricci has business this morning. He asked me to ensure you see Naples properly. A pause, then. He may join us later, if his schedule permits. Relief and disappointment tangled in my chest. I chose to examine neither too closely. The castle stood on a small island connected to the mainland by a causeway, its golden stone walls gleaming in the morning sun. Franco proved a surprisingly knowledgeable guide, pointing out architectural details and sharing historical anecdotes as we explored the medieval fortress. The name means egg castle, he explained as we stood on the ramparts, the Bay of Naples spreading before us in a canvas of blue. Legend says the Roman poet Virgil placed a magical egg in the foundations. If the egg breaks, Naples will fall to disaster. Do you believe that? I asked, leaning against the ancient stone, the breeze lifting my hair. A rare smile crossed Franco's face. In Naples, even those who claim not to believe in such things still take precautions. We continued to the archaeological museum, where Franco arranged for a private docent to guide us through the collections. The Farnese Bull, the Alexander mosaic, the secret cabinet of erotic art. Each new wonder momentarily distracted me from the strangeness of my situation. By early afternoon, my stomach was growling again. Franco led me to a small restaurant overlooking the bay, where a table on the terrace had been reserved in my name. The maitre d' greeted Franco with obvious deference, bowing slightly as he showed us to the best table. Everyone seems to know you, I observed as we were seated, or rather, they seem to know who you work for. Franco's expression remained neutral. Mr. Ricci is a respected businessman in Naples. The careful phrasing told me volumes. What kind of businessman inspires that much respect? Or is it fear? Franco's face remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. In Naples, respect and fear often go hand in hand. One rarely exists without the other. Before I could press further, a waiter appeared with a bottle of white wine, uncorking it with a flourish. Compliments of Mr. Ricci, he announced, pouring a sample for me to taste. The wine was crisp and light, with notes of citrus and something floral. I nodded my approval, and the waiter filled my glass before retreating. Does Alessio always lavish such attention on random women he meets on planes? I asked, taking another sip despite myself. Franco studied me with unexpected intensity. Mr. Ricci does nothing randomly. The statement hung between us, heavy with implication. I set down my glass, appetite suddenly diminished. What does that mean? It means you have caught his interest. That is uncommon. And should I be flattered or terrified by that? The question came out sharper than I intended. Franco's expression softened fractionally. Mr. Ricci is a powerful man with certain protective instincts. Your situation appealed to those instincts. My situation? Alarm bells rang in my head. How much did they know? A woman alone, running from something, or someone. Bruises she tries to hide. Franco shrugged, the gesture almost apologetic. Mr. Ricci notices such things. And what does he want in return for his protection? I'd made that bargain once before with Eric. Never again. That is between you and him. Franco glanced at his watch. Speaking of whom, he will be joining us shortly. My pulse quickened. Part of me wanted to flee, to return to my shabby hotel room and hide. But where would I go then? My funds were dwindling. I knew no one in this country, and apparently, Alessio Ricci could find me anyway. The waiter returned with menus, but Franco waved them away, ordering in rapid Italian. Mr. Ricci took the liberty of arranging the menu, he explained. Traditional Neapolitan specialties. Does he make all decisions for women he barely knows? I asked, remembering Eric's habit of ordering for me in restaurants, claiming I wouldn't know what to choose. Only when he believes they will benefit from his experience, came a deep voice from behind me. I turned to find Alessio standing there, even more imposing in daylight. He wore another impeccably tailored suit, charcoal gray today, with a deep blue tie that almost matched my dress. Not a coincidence, I was sure. Mr. Ricci, Franco acknowledged, standing immediately. That will be all for now, Franco, Alessio said, his eyes never leaving mine. I'll see to Ms. Riley's entertainment for the remainder of the day. Franco nodded, bowing slightly to both of us before departing with silent efficiency. Alessio took the vacated seat, his movements fluid and controlled. The dress suits you, as I thought it would. How did you know my size? I asked, forcing steel into my voice, or where I was staying, or anything about me at all. He smiled, reaching for the wine bottle to refill my glass. Naples is my city, Sophia. Very little happens here without my knowledge. That doesn't answer my question, doesn't it? His dark eyes held mine, challenging. You checked into a hotel in a district no tourist should visit alone, using the name you gave me on the plane. Finding you was elementary. And my dress size? His gaze swept over me briefly, professionally assessing rather than leering. Years of experience in the textile import business. I have an eye for measurements. The explanation sounded reasonable, yet something told me there was more to it. Before I could question him further, the first course arrived. Delicate fried squash blossoms stuffed with ricotta and herbs. Try them while they're hot, Alessio encouraged. Chef Marcello makes the best in the city. I took a tentative bite. The crisp exterior gave way to creamy cheese infused with basil and something citrusy. Despite my wariness, I couldn't help but close my eyes briefly in appreciation. When I opened them, Alessio was watching me with obvious satisfaction. You see? Some decisions are better left to those who know. Like what to wear, where to go, who to trust, I countered. I've played that game before. It doesn't end well. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. The man who hurt you. Tell me about him. It wasn't a request. Why? So you can add him to some collection of information you're gathering about me, so I can understand what you're running from. Alessio took a sip of wine, his composure perfect, and perhaps ensure he doesn't find you. A chill ran down my spine. What makes you think he's looking? Men like that always look. Their possessions belong to them, in their minds. Even when they break them. His voice had hardened, something cold and lethal beneath the cultured surface. I'm not a possession, I said firmly. Not his. Not anyone's. Alessio's expression softened slightly. Of course not. Which is why you ran. The simple understanding in his tone nearly undid me. 3 years with Eric, and no one had seen, no one had understood, or if they had, they'd looked away, unwilling to involve themselves. Yet this stranger had recognized my situation instantly. His name is Eric, I found myself saying. We met at the diner where I worked. He was charming at first, generous, said he'd take care of everything. I laughed bitterly. And he did. Controlled everything, monitored everything. The first time he hit me was 6 months in. After that, I trailed off, unable to continue. Alessio's hand moved as if to cover mine on the table, then stopped, retreating to his wine glass instead. And now you've escaped, started over. Trying to, I acknowledged. Though I didn't exactly plan well, few escapes are methodical. The important thing is that you left. More dishes appeared. Pasta with clams and a light wine sauce, grilled sea bass with lemon, a salad of bitter greens and sweet tomatoes. each one more delicious than the last. But my appetite had diminished with the conversation. "What about you?" I asked, pushing my food around my plate. "What's your story, Alessio Ricci, mysterious businessman who knows everything about Naples?" A slight smile played at his lips. "My family has been in Naples for generations. We facilitate commerce." "That's impressively vague," he laughed, the sound rich and unexpectedly warm. "Import-export, real estate, shipping, security, diverse interests, as I mentioned on the plane. And all of those interests make waiters bow and hotel clerks give up my room number without question." His expression grew serious again. "In Naples, connections matter more than money. My family has both." "Family," I repeated. "You mentioned brothers?" "Two," he confirmed. "Matteo handles our operations in Rome and Milan. Luca oversees our interests in Sicily and our international connections." "And you got Naples?" "I am the eldest," he said simply, as if that explained everything. Perhaps in his world it did. The waiter appeared to clear our plates, offering dessert menus which Alessio waved away once again. "The lemon tart," he instructed, "and espresso." When the waiter had gone, I leaned forward. "You know, most women don't appreciate men who make all their decisions. And yet, you're still here," he observed, "wearing the dress I sent, eating the food I ordered, seeing Naples through my eyes." "Because you've left me few options," I pointed out. "My money's running out, I don't speak Italian, and apparently you can find me wherever I go in this city anyway." "I could find you in any city," he said quietly. The statement not a threat, but a simple fact. "But that doesn't mean you lack options. You could have refused my gifts, rejected Franco's escort, walked out of this restaurant at any time." His dark eyes studied me. "You didn't." I had no good answer for that. Why had I accepted his overtures? Was I simply trading one controlling man for another, so quickly after my escape? No. Something was different about Alessio. His control didn't feel like Eric's desperate need to dominate, to break me down until nothing remained but what he wanted. Alessio's authority felt innate, as if the world simply arranged itself according to his expectations. The dessert arrived, 2 perfect tarts with a thin layer of lemon curd on shortbread, topped with berries. The espresso came in tiny cups, black as pitch. "What do you want from me, Alessio?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me since the plane. "Why the gifts, the tour guide, this lunch? What's your end game?" He considered me for a long moment, stirring a small spoonful of sugar into his espresso. "Initially? Curiosity. A beautiful woman, clearly intelligent, running from something, sitting beside me on a transatlantic flight." He shrugged elegantly. "It seemed like fate." "I don't believe in fate." "No? Then what brought you to Naples, of all places?" "It was the first flight out," I admitted. His smile was knowing. "And yet, here you are, in my city, at my table." He sipped his espresso. "As for what I want now, let's just say I find myself reluctant to say goodbye." The simple admission stirred something in me I thought Eric had killed long ago. Desire, interest, the flutter of attraction. I tamped it down fiercely. "I'm not looking for a relationship," I said firmly, "especially not with a man who seems to command an entire city. I wouldn't presume to know what you're looking for, Sophia." The way he said the name still carried a hint of doubt, as if he knew it wasn't quite right. "But perhaps I can offer something you need more urgently." "And what's that?" "Security," he said simply. "A place to stay that isn't in a neighborhood where Franco must rescue you from alleyway predators. A job, if you wish to remain in Naples beyond your dwindling funds. A new identity, if that would help keep your Eric from finding you." I stared at him, stunned by the offer and the casual way he presented it. "Why would you do all that for a stranger?" "You're hardly a stranger now," he pointed out. "And let's just say I have a personal interest in helping women escape men who harm them." Something in his tone hinted at a deeper story, but before I could ask, he continued. "I own a small villa on the coast, about 30 minutes from the city. There's a guest house, completely private. You would have your own entrance, your own space, no obligations, except to you," I said skeptically. He shook his head. Not even to me. Stay a week, a month, until you decide what's next, or decline, and I'll have Franco drive you back to your hotel right now, with no hard feelings. It sounded too good to be true. It probably was. Yet the alternative, my dingy hotel room, dwindling cash and no plan, seemed increasingly bleak. Why should I trust you? I asked. I don't even know who you really are. Alessio signaled for the check, signing it without looking at the amount. You shouldn't trust me, he said frankly. You shouldn't trust anyone, given what you've been through. But consider this. If I wished you harm, wouldn't I have done something last night, rather than sending Franco to protect you? He had a point, though it didn't entirely ease my suspicions. Think of it as a business arrangement, he continued. You need safe accommodation and time to plan your next steps. I have resources to provide both. In return, I ask only that you consider staying in Naples a while longer. His eyes held mine. The city grows on you, once you see its better side. I had a feeling he wasn't just talking about Naples. Block 5. And what happens at the end of this arrangement? I asked, searching his face for any hint of deception. When I've figured out my next steps, then you take them, Alessio replied simply. With my assistance if you wish it, or entirely on your own. I'm offering sanctuary, Sophia, not a cage. The distinction mattered. Eric's love had been a cage, gilded at first with sweet words and grand gestures, then revealed as the prison it always was, bars made of his rage and my fear. I need to think about it, I said finally. Of course. He stood, buttoning his jacket with that same fluid grace I'd noticed on the plane. Franco will take you wherever you wish to go. The offer remains open. You're not coming? His lips curved slightly. I have business to attend to. Besides, decisions like this should be made without undue influence. He seemed to understand that his presence was a force of gravity, pulling me toward a choice I might not otherwise make. The consideration was so unlike Eric, who would have pressed until I gave in, then punished me for hesitating. I'll have Franco bring you to the villa for dinner tonight, Alessio continued. You can see the guest house, then decide. No commitment. I found myself nodding. All right, dinner. His smile widened, genuine pleasure transforming his austere features. Excellent. 7 o'clock. He reached for my hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that should have seemed archaic but somehow felt natural coming from him. Until tonight, Sophia. He departed with a nod to the maitre d', who practically bowed in response. Through the window, I watched him slide into the back of a waiting black Maserati, a different driver than Franco holding the door. The car pulled away, sleek as a panther, merging effortlessly into the chaotic Naples traffic. Franco appeared moments later. Where would you like to go, Ms. Riley? I considered my options. Return to the hotel, see more of Naples. In the end, I chose what I needed most. Could you take me somewhere quiet, a park or garden where I can think? He nodded, understanding in his usually impassive face. I know just the place. The botanical gardens were an oasis of calm in the frenetic city. Franco left me at the entrance with a promise to return in 2 hours. Call if you need me sooner, he said, handing me a phone. Mr. Ricci thought you might require a secure line. The device was sleek and obviously expensive. I can't accept this. It's not a gift, merely a loan, for practicality. His expression remained professionally neutral. The hotel where you're staying, the area is not always reliable for foreign cell services. A convenient excuse, but I accepted the phone anyway. Having a way to call for help wasn't something I could easily refuse. I wandered the gardens alone, finding a secluded bench beneath a flowering tree. The scent of citrus blossoms surrounded me as I contemplated Alessio's offer. On the surface, it seemed perfect. Safe accommodation, time to plan, resources I desperately needed. Yet the prospect terrified me, not because I feared Alessio would be like Eric. Something told me their similarities ended at being commanding men. No, I feared myself, my own weakness, my pattern of falling for strong personalities who promised to solve my problems. I'd left Boston to find independence, not to trade one protector for another, yet here I was, considering exactly that. The phone in my pocket buzzed, a text message from a number not in the contacts. The guest house has its own kitchen. You can cook for yourself if you prefer. No shared meals required. He was anticipating my concerns, addressing them before I'd even voiced them. It was both thoughtful and unnerving. Another message followed. The door locks from the inside. Only you would have the key. That one struck deeper. He understood what I needed most. Control over my own space, my own safety. Something Eric had systematically stripped away. I typed a response before I could overthink it. Why are you doing this? The truth. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, my mother fled an abusive husband with 3 young sons. A stranger offered help with no expectations. I'm paying forward an old debt. The simple explanation rang true in a way his previous vague responses hadn't. It explained his instinctive recognition of my situation, his protective impulses, perhaps even his apparent power in Naples. A boy determined never to be powerless again. Before I could respond, another message arrived. There are some men who should never find what they've lost. The words sent a chill through me, not because they frightened me, but because they expressed exactly what I felt about Eric. He should never find me. Never. 2 hours later, Franco drove me back to my hotel to collect my meager belongings. The clerk behind the bulletproof glass barely looked up as I checked out early, forfeiting the remaining nights I'd paid for. As the Mercedes pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. The road to Alessio's villa wound along the coastline, offering stunning views of the Bay of Naples. We passed through a small village where children played in a square and old men sat outside a cafe, watching the world go by. Then the road climbed, houses becoming larger and more secluded, hidden behind stone walls and ornate gates. Alessio's property was announced by a high wall covered in flowering vines, a heavy iron gate opening automatically as Franco's car approached. The driveway curved through manicured gardens before revealing the villa, a magnificent 3-story structure of pale stone with a red-tiled roof and arched windows. The Mediterranean sparkled beyond it, a private stretch of coastline visible to the right. "It's beautiful," I murmured, overwhelmed by the casual display of wealth. "Mr. Ricci's family has owned this property for generations," Franco said, bringing the car to a stop in a circular driveway. "The guest house is this way." He led me along a stone path that wound through gardens fragrant with rosemary and lavender, away from the main house. The guest house stood slightly apart, smaller, but built in the same elegant style. A private terrace overlooked the sea. Franco unlocked the door, handing me the key before stepping back. "Mr. Ricci will arrive at 7. I'll come to escort you to the main house, or dinner can be served here if you prefer." The respect for my boundaries was so different from what I'd grown accustomed to with Eric that it left me momentarily speechless. "Thank you," I managed finally. I'll join him at the main house." Franco nodded and departed, leaving me to explore my new accommodation. The guest house was larger than it appeared from outside. A spacious living room with comfortable furniture and French doors opening to the terrace, a kitchen stocked with essentials, a bedroom with a bed that looked cloud-soft, a bathroom with a shower big enough for 2 and a soaking tub beside a window overlooking the sea. On the bed lay several shopping bags from high-end boutiques. A note in now familiar handwriting rested atop them, in case the blue dress needs a rest. No pressure to wear any of these tonight. I unpacked the bags with trembling fingers, a selection of dresses, tops, pants, even undergarments, all in my size, all exactly to my taste. Simple, elegant pieces I would have chosen myself if I'd had the means. Nothing overtly sexy or revealing. Nothing with designer labels prominently displayed. Just quality basics that would help me rebuild a wardrobe I'd left behind. I showered, washing away the tension of decision-making. As the hot water soothed my muscles, I reflected on how quickly my life had changed. 24 hours ago, I was in a dingy hotel, alone and afraid. Now I was preparing for dinner with a man who commanded respect throughout Naples, staying in his guest house, wearing clothes he'd provided. Was I trading one form of dependence for another? Or was this truly the sanctuary Alessio had promised? At precisely 6:55, a knock came at the door. Franco stood outside, as impassive as ever. "Mr. Ricci is ready to receive you, if you're ready." I'd chosen one of the dresses from the bags, a simple black sheath that felt like armor. I'm ready. The main house was even more impressive inside. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, art that looked museum-worthy on the walls. Franco led me through a series of rooms, each more elegant than the last, until we reached a terrace overlooking the bay. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and crimson. Alessio stood at the stone balustrade, his back to me, a glass of something amber in his hand. He turned as we approached, and for a moment, his composed expression faltered, revealing something raw and appreciative as he took in my appearance. "Sophia," he greeted, crossing to meet me. "You look lovely." "Thank you for the clothes," I said, determined to establish boundaries early, "but I can't accept them as gifts. I'll pay you back when I can." Rather than being offended, he seemed pleased by my assertion of independence. "Consider them a loan, then, like the phone. Practical necessities until you're settled." He gestured to a table set for two. "Shall we?" Franco disappeared, replaced by a silver-haired man in a butler's uniform who poured wine and served the first course, some kind of seafood antipasti. As we ate, Alessio kept the conversation deliberately light, telling me about the history of the villa, pointing out landmarks visible from our vantage point. It wasn't until dessert, a delicate panna cotta with berries, that he broached the subject of my decision. "The guest house is acceptable?" he asked. "It's magnificent," I admitted. "Far more than I expected." "And have you decided? Will you stay?" I set down my spoon, meeting his gaze directly. "Yes, but I have conditions." Something like respect flickered in his dark eyes. "Of course. First, I need a job. A real one, not something manufactured to give me pocket money. I need to support myself." He nodded. "The hotel I own in the city needs a guest relations manager, someone who speaks English and can help international visitors navigate Naples. The pay is fair, the hours reasonable. Second, no more gifts unless I ask for them. No more making decisions for me about what I eat or wear or do." "Agreed," he said, though a slight smile played at his lips. "Though I reserve the right to make suggestions. Third, I need to know who you really are." I leaned forward. "No more vague businessman explanations. If I'm staying here, involved with whatever this is, I need the truth." Alessio was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those penetrating dark eyes. Then he gestured to the butler, who discreetly withdrew. "My family," he began, voice low and serious, "has controlled certain aspects of Naples' economy for generations. Import-export, yes, but also protection, dispute resolution, investments. Areas where official channels sometimes fail. You're in the Mafia," I said bluntly, the pieces finally clicking into place. The deference everyone showed him, Franco's protective presence, the way he'd spoken about respect in Naples. He didn't flinch at the accusation. "That is an American oversimplification, but essentially correct. I head the Ricci family now, as my father did before me. I should have been terrified, should have run. Instead, I felt an odd sense of relief at finally understanding. And the man on the plane, the one Franco spoke to, a lieutenant in a rival organization who has been causing problems for a business under my protection. Our meeting was unplanned but fortuitous." "Did you hurt him?" I asked, needing to know what kind of man I was dealing with. "No," Alessio replied. "We reached an understanding without violence. I prefer it that way when possible." A shadow crossed his face, but I am capable of whatever is necessary to protect what's mine. The possessive phrase should have triggered alarm bells, reminded me of Eric. Instead, it felt like a promise of safety, a dangerous distinction perhaps. "Last condition," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "When I decide to leave, if I decide to leave, you let me go without complications." His expression softened. "Sophia, this is not a prison. You are free to come and go as you please, to stay or leave as you choose." He reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. "I would be disappointed if you left, but I would never cage you." I believed him. God help me. "Then we have a deal," I said, extending my hand to shake his, sealing our arrangement with a businesslike gesture. He took my hand, but instead of shaking it, he turned it gently, pressing his lips to my inner wrist, where the last of Eric's bruises was fading. The gesture was both tender and possessive, a promise and a claim. "Welcome to Naples, Sophia," he murmured against my skin, "your new beginning." As the sun disappeared below the horizon, casting the bay in twilight shadows, I knew I was stepping into something complex and potentially dangerous. But for the first time in years, the danger didn't feel directed at me. Instead, I had the strangest sensation that I'd found not just sanctuary, but protection so absolute that even Eric's ghost couldn't touch me here. Tomorrow, I would start my job, begin building a new life, learn to trust my own judgment again. But tonight, sitting across from a man who commanded an entire city, yet asked for my consent in every meaningful way, I allowed myself to feel something I'd almost forgotten: hope.